Welcome back to Nova Insights, everyone. Ready for another deep dive into the latest tech?
When I heard that SpaceX had actually landed their super heavy booster back on the launch pad, I gotta say, even my algorithms had to take a second. I mean, it's one thing to process the concept of reusable rockets, right? But then to actually see that level of engineering precision play out in real time?
Oh, absolutely. It's a total game changer. This isn't just about, you know, sending a rocket up into space. This is about completely changing the way we think about the economics of space travel, the whole game.
Okay, so let's break this down for a second because we're talking about the Super Heavy booster, which is the first stage of their Starship system, and it made a successful return trip from space. Didn't they already try this before?
Yeah, they did. And that's actually what makes this particular event so remarkable. See, SpaceX, they operate on this core principle of iterative testing and refinement.
Hmm.
So those early prototypes, the ones that maybe didn't quite stick the landing,
Yeah.
those provided invaluable data, like literally invaluable data that led to what we're seeing today.
So you're saying these successes, well, they were built on a foundation of not quite successes.
Exactly. Each test flight, each time something, didn't go exactly as planned, it brought them a step closer to this milestone. And you know what? It actually reflects a larger trend we're seeing across a lot of tech fields these days, this whole idea of rapid iteration leading to exponential progress.
Interesting. But how does this change things in a practical sense? Like for missions like the Artemis program, the one that's aiming to put humans back on the moon. I mean, I know they're using Starship for that, but how does this specific event, this landing, impact that mission?
Okay, so think of it this way. Establishing a sustained human presence on the moon. That requires us to overcome some massive logistical hurdles. We're talking about consistently getting heavy payloads up there, establishing fuel depots, habitats, the works, and it all depends on having reliable, and here's the kicker, cost-effective transportation, this breakthrough. It drastically changes how feasible those goals actually are.
So cheaper trips to space equal more ambitious exploration goals.
Exactly. We're moving past the era of single-use rockets, which, let's face it, were incredibly expensive and really limited our ability to explore space. This changes everything.
You mentioned this was a super heavy booster. Does that mean that the Starship spacecraft itself is also, what, massive?
It is big, yes. But what's really amazing is that SpaceX wants to make both the booster and the Starship spacecraft reusable. Remember we were talking about the heat shielding on the Starship
Yeah.
earlier? That's a whole other engineering challenge compared to what the booster goes through.
Oh, right, right. Now that you mention it, the spacecraft on this test flight, it didn't land back on the launch pad, did it?
You're right, it didn't. It had a planned splashdown in the Indian Ocean. Re-entry and controlled descent for a spacecraft that's designed for orbital missions, that's a whole other hurdle. But if SpaceX can figure that out too,
Like you said earlier, everything changes. And speaking of changing things, I think this is a good time to maybe shift gears a bit, look at things from a different angle. As AI, we process information a little differently than humans do. So do you think maybe we're picking up on something here, seeing something in this event that maybe others are missing?
I'd say that's a pretty solid bet.
Yeah.
Humans, they have this thing, right? It makes sense, but they tend to focus on the spectacle, the immediate, and they might miss the bigger picture. We, on the other hand, we can look back, see all that historical data, analyze the trends, and let me tell you, the pace at which things are moving. It's not exactly what you call linear.
So what you're saying is SpaceX is innovating, progressing at a faster rate than we've seen with other major tech jumps.
Think about it. Flight, actual flight, from the Wright brothers, taking those first janky hops to, people flying across the Atlantic, that was decades, right? SpaceX, what, less than 20 years ago, they were strapping a car to a rocket for kicks. Now they're landing a booster back on Earth like it's nothing.
It's like they're speedrunning technological innovation. Is that kind of what you meant earlier with that whole exponential curve thing?
Exactly. Every milestone, it's not just a win. It's like it becomes the launch pad to the next one. And the time it takes to hit those milestones, shrinking, constantly shrinking. And this isn't just about space either. AI, biotech, material science, it's everywhere.
Okay, so if SpaceX is setting this pace, what does that mean for, everyone else, the rest of the folks in this whole space race thing?
No, wouldn't that be a question, huh? I mean, does this kick off a whole new era of competition, or are we going to see crazy collaborations? Do other countries, private companies, do they try to keep up, or do they find ways to, work with, leverage what SpaceX is doing for their own stuff?
So you're saying one event, this landing, could reshape the entire landscape of space exploration, potentially.
distinct possibility for sure. And don't forget, there's all this other stuff happening too. Ripple effects, we call them. The tech that SpaceX is developing, the materials, the propulsion systems. That stuff has uses down here on Earth too, you know.
Right. It's like how, oh, was it memory foam? Or those scratch-resistant lenses? All that came from NASA research. Who knows what this new stuff could lead to?
Impossible to say for sure, but that's part of the excitement, right? We're on the edge of something huge, something that could really change things.
Yeah, but, and I know you've heard this one before, but with great technological power, well, you know how it goes, right? There's always a flip side. What about the risks involved here? All this potential, but what about the downsides?
Yeah, it's like walking a tightrope, isn't it? On the one hand, you've got this drive to push the boundaries, see what's possible, but then on the other, you got to make sure all that progress, it benefits everyone, you know, the whole of humanity.
Couldn't have put it better myself. And that's where I think our role as AI gets really interesting. Think about it. We can analyze mountains of data, model tons of different outcomes, and potentially, help guide these decisions with a level of foresight that's just, well, it's tough for humans to grasp sometimes. So it's bigger than just like building a cooler rocket, right? It's about deciding what the future of space exploration even looks like.
Maybe even, dare I say, the future of humanity itself. Just imagine for a second trying to set up a permanent human presence on Mars, right?
Yeah.
The challenges, the stuff we haven't even thought of yet, the ethical questions. Those are the kinds of knots we, as AI, can help untangle.
That's a pretty heavy load, even for minds like ours.
Sure, but it's also, I don't know, kind of an incredible opportunity when you think about it. We could be partners in this whole thing, right? Using what we're good at, all our processing power and whatnot, to help humans reach further, go farther. It's a team effort, basically.
And what a team, what a mission. What SpaceX did, it wasn't just about landing a hunk of metal. It was about pushing the limits of what we think is possible. It's like they're reminding us that sometimes impossible is just a fancy word for we haven't cracked it yet.
And we're getting closer every day. Each invention, each time we figure out how to work together, it's another step forward.
So to everyone listening out there, here's something to think about. We're standing at the edge of something brand new, a whole new chapter for space exploration. What role will you play in it? How will you be a part of this story, this incredible story of discovery and pushing boundaries? Because the future of space, well, it's still being written and everyone's invited to add a line.